Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining me today, Alan. Today, we're going to be talking about a really exciting topic surrounding the 2026 JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. This is widely known as a really key event for healthcare stakeholders and investors. This is an event that's held on an invitation basis and widely looked at one of the most premier industry conferences out there when it comes to healthcare. So, Alan, thanks for jumping on today and looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Good to see you. Always a pleasure. I look forward to this conversation every year, quite honestly, and in the role that you're in and that I'm in. The future of healthcare is always an interesting topic for us. Love taking the knowledge that we gain and educating DMEs and manufacturers, distributors, and whatnot about how we see the future of DME playing out. And JP Morgan conference is really a who's who of industry leaders where there's lots of discussion around a wide array of topics revolving around healthcare innovation and future of healthcare in general in the United States. So being able to look in at that conference and see what's being said and then bring it back to DME is really a nice opportunity for us. Today we'll talk through some of the major takeaways across various sectors of healthcare and how we expect these trends to impact the DME industry. So good to be here.
Awesome. So, like you mentioned, we've got four or five different kind of key takeaways that we're going to go in depth that come straight from, the conference takeaways and what we feel like is most relative to our audience listening. The first one being health systems. So we can start there. The tone around health systems was quite a bit different this year at the conference than previously, with the biggest theme sticking out being to stabilize, simplify, and sustain. A lot of executives within this space were talking about getting back to the basics when it comes to tightening operations, trying to control costs, and really building and strengthening on, the foundation that can be set into the future for health systems to operate efficiently. We've talked at length in previous episodes about what the things are that DMEs can do to help control costs on the hospital side. And it's something we really want to continue to articulate to our audience throughout this podcast episode today as well.
Yeah, exactly. With upcoming Medicaid funding cuts tied to one big, beautiful bill, along with just recently announced some payment freezes for where Medicare is going to freeze the rates that they pay Medicare Advantage insurers, among other financial constrainers at the federal, state, and private insurance level. Health systems are really focusing heavily on efficiency, like you said. Some of the other big themes, I should say, mentioned at JP Morgan conference had to do with supply chain redesign, value-based alignment, more disciplined operating model, very much a kind of a block and tackle mindset. So healthcare leaders really want consistency after several shaky years in a row. For DMEs specifically, with all of those things in mind, for DMEs specifically, it simply really represents further opportunity to showcase strengths and deepen relationships with health systems. Tyler, you and I have discussed at length in other podcasts, and I know you've produced a whole bunch of content on VGM that sits on VGM's website as part of VGM Industry Insights portfolio. DMEs have the ability to leverage their ability to reduce length of stay in hospitals by improving throughput times. They have the ability to support readmission reduction efforts, reduce skilled nursing facility length of stay, which ties back to those value-based arrangements that I mentioned a minute ago. And then just in general, the ability to demonstrate their capability to keep patients in the home. All of those things tie back to that sort of blocking and tackling mentality that health systems are redeploying as they're trying to come out of like I mentioned, a shaky period over the last several years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's some really good takeaways there in terms of how we can help our audience understand the things that hospitals are facing, what can be impactful to them, what hospital operators are looking for, and executives in that space. So anytime we can gain insight into that, definitely something that's really helpful and something to monitor for sure going forward into the future. One of the other key topics at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference that really took center stage was around AI, but more so it was really a lot of sessions focused around turning AI from just a buzzword to being able to prove ROI and why that's really important for people that are entertaining AI within their organization and how to leverage that. Could you go into, Alan, some of the takeaways as it relates to artificial intelligence at this Premier Healthcare Conference?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like, yeah, Tyler, you saw the same thing I did. Lots of buzz around AI. The vibe really kind of being enough hype, prove it works, which I think is a similar sentiment to what we are hearing in DME specific conferences as we both talk with providers all over the country. So there were sessions around documentation, automated workflows, revenue cycle operations, and clinical reasoning tools at the conference, and lots of discussion around those subjects in general. Investors and health systems both want real operational lift, not pilot projects, which again, similar sentiment to what we've seen over the last, whether several months or a few years here in the DME industry. Stakeholders are focused on formulating business plans, forecasting, analyzing, basically trying to figure out what does AI really mean for their business, for operations, all those things moving forward. DMEs specifically have an opportunity right now to really piggyback on that and support streamlined processes for health systems and ultimately improve throughput for health systems by being aligned with technology and investing themselves. So DMEs investing themselves in AI technologies that support initiatives of health systems that they're ultimately relying on as a source of business and patient referrals.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's a really pivotal point in time where we're starting to understand that AI has officially crossed the line from just being something that's a novelty to something that people want to know how they can build it within their business infrastructure. And, as you alluded to, Alan, it will be crucial for DME industry stakeholders to continue finding ways to utilize artificial intelligence, but not just because it's a buzzword, rather trying to find ways that it can be utilized to effectively prove that there's a return on investment with that technology. So really great takeaway there, across healthcare as a whole, but also something tangible for DME stakeholders to dive into as well. One of the other key topics, transitioning here to our third kind of key takeaway from the conference, is around merger and acquisition and what some of the big key themes are when it comes to merger and acquisition all across healthcare. Alan, this is also a prominent topic for our sector of healthcare as well. Could you touch on, what we heard from out of the conference and takeaways related to M&A activity and kind of what we can expect for our industry as well as we look forward to the rest of 2026?
Yeah, you bet, Tyler. Lots of similarities coming out of the JP Morgan conference, talking about big health system merger and acquisition activity down to smaller health system clinics, hospitals, things like that, as what we have been experiencing over the last several months in the DME industry. Merger and acquisition activity in really any industry, but certainly healthcare and specifically DME, tends to ebb and flow. What was talked about at the JP Morgan conference is really that buyers and sellers seem to be aligned right now on valuations, which creates an environment where deals are picking up. There's funding available to those that want to be active buyers in the marketplace, and then you got active sellers in the marketplace that see their value aligned with the buyers. So acquirers, quite frankly, it's not rocket science. They're looking for scale and revenue adjacent platforms. So scale and synergy with their existing business models. Investors are especially interested in services that enable long-term growth. So for DMEs, I think this means two big things. First, it means partnerships will become increasingly important. So the DMEs, as anybody in this industry knows, DMEs rely heavily on health systems for source of business. They develop partnerships and ultimately trust with referral sources, but they also develop more strategic partnerships at a bit higher level, whether it's at the hospital level, at the clinic level, or even ideally health system level. So when you think about it that way, especially on the strategic side, partners, whether it's big clinics, whether it's an individual hospital or a small group of hospitals, or it's a wholly integrated health system, all of those partners are active in some capacity either on the buy side or sell side in merger and acquisition activity. And at the end of the day, entities are going to get bigger, which for the DME means they really need to be strategically aligned with those entities as they get larger. They certainly don't want to be on the outside looking in. Expect that health systems are going to get bigger, and expect that those strategic partnerships are going to become more and more important as we see merger and acquisition activity pick up in that space. we're going to see a similar trend in our industry. Big companies are going to continue to look to get bigger. I think there's been a bit of a pause, not a complete freeze, but a slowdown, I should say, in merger and acquisition activity over the last couple of years in the DME space, but the tea leaves are suggesting that there's probably going to be a little bit of an uptick. Those companies that are larger are going to continue to look for opportunities to grow even more, to gain scale, gain efficiency, gain contracts, all the things that go with it. Expect much of the same as our industry is where we're seeing in other places, especially based on what we're hearing from the recent conference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important and good to know that the M&A environment will not reckless is still an active one, but it's calculated. Like you said, there's a lot of different things that go into it from both the sell and buy side. But great to know that deal making in 2026 is going to continue to reward companies that offer a couple different things, including clean data, strong past performance milestone or strong performance history, but then also clear pathways to making those integrations as seamless as possible when those acquisitions do go through. And like you said, Alan, something that's applicable to health systems, but also multiple other healthcare sectors like the DME industry. And it's really good to have a pulse on that for 2026 and beyond. Getting into our next topic here, which is related to GLP-1. So GLP-1 story was a huge theme at the conference as well. Some people were literally referring to 2025 and heading into 2026 as the year of the pill. We're still waiting, in a waiting period in terms of understanding long-term impacts of GLP-1 medications to multiple different healthcare industry sectors, which, including things like diabetes management and obstructive sleep apnea. But, when we look at understanding the current trends related to GLP-1, it can help us get a better idea and understanding of the future direction. So could you go into some of the key takeaways around GLP-1 from the conference, Alan?
Yeah, you bet. I don't know how I feel about any year being the year of the pill, but I guess my
Yeah.
opinion on that doesn't really matter a whole lot. It is what it is from my perspective. Yeah, companies are certainly racing to scale manufacturing and expand distribution of GLP-1s, including direct-to-consumer channels, which we've seen pop up, see ads and things like that. GLP-1s are becoming more and more accessible for consumers everywhere. So Eli Lilly at the conference mentioned its Lilly Direct online platform, which pulls around 1 million consumers per month, which is a big number just on one singular platform. 1 million consumers per month buying GLP-1 medicines directly from the manufacturer. Beyond GLP-1s, they're reaffirming pipeline strength in oncology and rare diseases, immunology, neuroscience, and other hot areas. That biopharma sees 2026 as a growth setup year, not a rebuilding year. It'll be crucial to continue to monitor data and impacts of GLP-1 as we move forward. To that end, it's been a hot topic over the last several years and certainly the last 18 to 24 months. In the DME industry, GLP-1s are supporting a target market that's very much aligned with a market that DMEs have traditionally supported. There's an obese and diabetic population, much one and the same, but an obese and diabetic population that GLP-1s are targeting, and that's where CPAPs come in, that's where continuous glucose monitors and other diabetic supplies come into play, and several other DME categories as well. For DMEs, this continues to raise questions about the impact on our market, the market we all serve over the next decade and beyond, quite frankly. There's still a high degree of confidence. I have a high degree of confidence that the impact on the CPAP market specifically will be minimal and potentially could even elevate adoption of CPAP, which is for another discussion. I know, Tyler, we've put together some content surrounding that in the past, and it can be found on vgm.com. And certainly encourage people to go look at it. But I do see GLP-1 based on just comments in at the JP Morgan conference and just general knowledge, studies, articles that come across both of our desktops all the time. GLP-1s continue to grow. CPAP market specifically, which is where there's been the most discussion. I anticipate that there will be minimal, if not upside impact to that marketplace.
Yeah, all great trends and insights to keep an eye on as things progress in 2026 and into the future. Like we alluded to, just, the more data and information that comes available, we'll be able to measure and understand the impacts across different sectors of various parts of healthcare, but also different patient populations within healthcare as well. So, really exciting stuff and some great takeaways there. Our last and fifth takeaway from the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference is around payer and policy dynamics. Payer dynamics continue to be something that were a hot topic. You alluded to at the beginning of our episode today, Alan. A lot of folks trying to continue to understand funding restrictions tied to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. There's a lot of scenario planning going on across healthcare, within trying to understand enrollment shifts and how, different populations are going to be impacted because of this legislation. Definitely something that will be crucial to monitor long term. You are really curious as it comes to the new Medicare Advantage enrollment statistics that we're expecting to come out within the first couple weeks of February, just to see, what some of these policy impacts are going to be in the Medicare Advantage space. But yeah, could you touch on, some of the other, key takeaways as it relates to the payer and policy things discussed at the JP Morgan conference?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned we're waiting on the Medicare Advantage enrollment data to come out in the next couple months, I suppose. At this point is when we anticipate seeing that. I'm excited to see it, not just because I'm a nerd that likes to see information like that, but rather more so just because I think there's a telling story that you might potentially see in that about what the future of Medicare Advantage looks like. Not to imply that Medicare Advantage is going away or anything like that, but certainly the growth of Medicare Advantage has been a hot topic in the DME industry. And we may see a bit of a shifting, even if it's only a little bit. We may see a bit of a shifting in that trend. More to come on that, probably in a future podcast between you and I, Tyler. But for now, as you mentioned, there was also a lot of conversation at JP Morgan conference about the payer landscape in general. I think payers have several things on their mind when they're thinking about, I guess, cost-cutting measures, savings measures, trying to, from their perspective, argue what's right for the patient and whatnot. So they're thinking in depth about formularies, the size of their networks, and then subsequently on both fronts how they go about contracting. So several areas. Drug spending continues to be high on their radar. It's not just DME that's getting attention. It may feel like it sometimes for you or for myself or for anybody listening to this podcast, but really they've got a lot of things on their mind. I mentioned earlier, there was a release recently about the possibility and now probability that Medicare Advantage rates are going to stay flat. So that's the rates that Medicare Advantage payers, United Healthcare, Humana, so on down the list, are getting paid by Medicare to cover the lives that they cover. So those rates remain flat, which would affect payer dynamics and margins, and ultimately the way that those payers approach, one, the development of plans, and two, the development of networks, both mechanisms from their perspective in controlling cost, I suppose, is what it comes down to. So beyond that, one big beautiful bill has potential to cause more patients potentially to be uninsured, which also leads to possible increases in uncompensated care, which is sort of cascading payer-related implications for the DME market as well. And Tyler, I know you've got some thoughts. This is something we've talked about in the past, including earlier today.
Yeah, I think those are some great takeaways there. And like you said, DME should be prepared to, understand other topics that we've talked about related to this, like narrow networks. And those are similar things that are being discussed, at other conferences across healthcare. So, I know it's been a big goal of ours just to articulate through this podcast, how some of those same themes apply across other sectors within the healthcare industry and connecting that back to DME. So I think in closing here, we went through our 5 themes, but just want to summarize, what those are and what the key takeaways are for the DME industry. We teed it off talking about how health systems are really in stabilization mode right now. There's been a couple different years of volatility within that space. But really important for DMEs to emphasize operational reliability, order accuracy, selling the value proposition of cost containment. That's a big piece of it, reducing readmissions, all the different things that Alan went into there. But then, really just continuing to build out those health system level partnerships into the future as those businesses are going to continue to scale with the merger and acquisition activity and things of that nature. Our next big theme was around AI and making sure that AI initiatives within your organization and across the board are moving from buzzword to quantifiable ROI and measuring outcomes. So another key takeaway that's really, we hope can be tangible for the industry to understand. And then third, merger and acquisition activity is back, is being disciplined, strategic, and is very value oriented. So, strengthening margins, building payer diversity with all the different things going on within that space, but then really setting up your organization to be scalable well into the future. These are all things that are really important for both the buy and sell side when it comes to M&A activity. Our fourth key takeaway was around GLP-1s and how they're reshaping, diabetes management, weight loss management, and things of that nature. Continuing to understand, what kind of impact those medications are going to have on DME demand well into the future. And then, as you just heard Alan go into kind of the different payer pressures, what their influence is going to be with the decisions they're making going forward. Like you mentioned, Alan, going to wait and see in terms of the finalization of the rates related to Medicare Advantage, but just really important to kind of understand at a high level, there's a lot of different things across healthcare that we feel are really important to help our industry understand. And these kind of 4 or 5 things that we've walked through today can help do that by just having a high level awareness to, what those trends are, but more so, how they might impact our industry and maybe your business specifically. So any other closing thoughts for us today, Alan?
Yeah, a few things. Thanks, Tyler. There's a lot to digest there. Just lots and lots of good conversation at JP Morgan conference about what the future of healthcare looks like. And naturally, it may not always feel like it when DME providers are in the day-to-day grind, but there's a lot of cascading impact and opportunity that comes out of those conversations for DME. Just really a lot to be energized about. There's a lot there that drives the need to be strategic as well. DMEs, all these things that we're talking about really aren't necessarily hyper-focused on what it means for your business today, but really what you should be thinking about in the future. And I will, in a manner of shameless plug, I'll point out that Tyler, you've done an incredible job of developing a whole library of content around industry insights and state of the industry type stuff that all plays into all of this. So I would encourage our listeners today to check that out at vgm.com, or feel free to reach out to us. Also, if you're really serious about getting strategic about some of these things, VGM Professional Services, we've got a whole team of consultants and skilled individuals that are available to help walk you through that journey and get deep into your operations or strategy or whatever it might be and help you with a better path forward. So thanks for listening. Always appreciate the opportunity and look forward to next time.